Welcome to Professor Sky's spam channel. So this is where I talk about stuff that isn't music. And I'm going to be talking about music a little bit, but I sort of have to. So I watched the Super Bowl, like many hundred millions of us have, and I watched the Super Bowl halftime show. And what's interesting is, I'm teaching this class about French rock and roll and hip hop. And the whole class is based on this concept that music can reflect life. And right now we're like way back in the 60s and we're talking about rock and roll and baby boomers and stuff. But eventually we're going to get to rap music and how it reflects reality of France today and etc. And so I couldn't stop myself. I made a little lesson for my students about how the Super Bowl show reflects life. And what I always try to explain to them is that reflecting life doesn't just mean like, oh, my life, like, oh, I have a girlfriend, or oh, I can't wait to eat lunch, or I want to get into school. It's more like society itself, culture, history, politics. And I thought that the Super Bowl halftime show was an orgy of American history. It was the last 30 or 40 years in America's relationship with race and class disparity and police brutality. And it was all just thrown out there on the biggest possible stage. America reflected itself back to itself and didn't even fully recognize it. And so what I want to do for my students, and by extension, what I want to do for you, is share a little bit of what I saw when I was watching this. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only person to say all these things, right? There's going to be other people commenting on this, but I want to show you what I've prepared for my students, if for no other reason than just to help me prepare for today's class. So, there's a picture of all the people there, Eminem and Kendrick Lamar and Dr. Dre, Mary J. Blige, 50 Cent, Snoop Dogg. First of all, quick side note, this is the coolest Snoop Dogg has been in like 20 years. Ever since he started doing like phone commercials, he hasn't been very cool. He actually seemed pretty cool in this episode, in this performance. But, like the first thing I want to talk about with my students is how bizarre this scene was. I mean, if you told me back in the mid 80s in the late 80s, when I was being introduced to Compton, California, as a suburbanite in protected, privileged Massachusetts, if you had told me that there'd be a Super Bowl show that would cost millions of dollars to make in Los Angeles, celebrating the music and the people and the culture of Compton, California, I would have said you're crazy. I would have said you were crazy 15 years after that when I lived in LA. When I had a friend, Brad, who substitute taught in South Central Los Angeles and told me about the things that he saw and the existence and how the inequities that are talked about in music hadn't improved at all. I mean, think about this. The difference between the life experience of the performers versus the life experience of the audience. Think about this, okay? I mean, this is the median household income as of 2018 of Los Angeles, right? And what we're seeing here is the performers, with the exception of Eminem, who's from Detroit, and 50 Cent is from New York. They're all from down here in Compton or Long Beach. And just as a reminder, the lighter it is on the map, the less there is for median household income as of 2018. So the experiences that were described, the poverty, the desperation, the crime, all described in these areas. And so here we have for the entire world, I hate to use a grad school world, but a simulacrum, a representation of lower class California, of South Central Los Angeles, of the unprivileged, of the forgotten by society, with its storefronts representing African American culture in South Central Los Angeles, including a burger shack, a barber shop, and a strip club. A strip club. I mean, in the middle of this entire football stadium, we have a strip club. I mean, obviously, I was talking about that with my son. He's like, well, how different is that than the cheerleaders? To which I said, touche. But this amazing scene, first of all, Kanye, obviously, Kanye already put a house in the middle of a football stadium. Always need to give Kanye credit where he deserves it. But there's something so inspiring and bizarre and unsettling about this whole thing, where this $5 billion stadium in the middle of Inglewood, which according to Tupac was up to no good, but in this case is the scene of this of the most commercial, most mainstream event you can possibly have. You have all of these stylized representations of the people who have been and are continually forgotten by our society. It's not like, thanks to NWA or thanks to Kendrick Lamar, the situation is all of a sudden better in those places on the map that are closer to light than they are to red. So it's not like a fanciful representation of, hey, this is what it was like in the 50s and let's go to the hop, baby. No, this is like it. This is like the actual place that is Inglewood's on that map too, right? It's that place exists. That the lowrider culture and the barber shops and the disenfranchised people and the high unemployment and the school systems, which are criminally misrun and underfunded and undersupported. That's like 5 minutes from where this recreation is, where this multi-million-dollar recreation is that Jay-Z designed and orchestrated for everybody. I mean, like the semiotics of this, just the ideas of all these things happening, like the wealth gap in America is being presented to us and glamorized and commodified and sold back to us. But I'm not just crossing my arms like some kind of angry socialist and saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying this is just interesting. I mean, how much more interesting can you get than this representation of a life of poverty made by millionaires and in a couple cases billionaires for the American public? Because this is what I think of. When I think of Los Angeles, I think of this. I think of the 1992 riots. You see, the 1992 riots were a part of the show. Police brutality was a part of the halftime show. It was an integral part of the halftime show. There was an entire dialogue happening in my head and in the head of many people watching, that the entire thing was about police brutality. Okay, yeah, we got 50 Cent hanging upside down like Michael Keaton's Batman doing Into Club. Okay, that's off the side. Forget that. But this is Los Angeles. All of them were adults when Los Angeles was burning down, except for Kendrick Lamar, who I think was probably 5 years old when his city burned down. He was born in 87, these are 92, right? Here's the buildings that suffered the worst damage from those riots. Let's do a little overlay here. What a coincidence. All right there in those same areas where these people are from. When I think of Los Angeles and I think of these areas, I often think of the Rodney King beatings. They were caught on tape and that sparked those riots. When I think of Los Angeles, I think of the police, I think of the Rampart scandal, which I'm going to read to my students here. More than 70 police officers assigned to something which was designed, Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. They were implicated in various forms of misconduct, unprovoked shootings, unprovoked beatings, planting of false evidence, stealing and dealing narcotics, bank robbery, perjury, covering up these elements. This was after the riots. People talk about police brutality, people talk about the difficulties of policing in Los Angeles. It's not like it stopped. Fascinating side note, in the Rampart scandal, it all got set off by two police officers. Probably both of them were corrupt, one white shooting one black police officer. And he said the reason why was, and you see it down here, in my training experience, this guy had "I'm a gang member" written all over him. I mean, what does that mean? I have a gang member written all over him. But it turns out this officer also worked for Death Row Records, worked for Suge Knight, worked for the guy who helped and produced many albums by Dr. Dre, California Love. The sort of showstopper and the entire thing yesterday was produced by the record company that was owned by Suge Knight, who was implied in this Rampart scandal. This corruption is not limited by race. So when I'm seeing this, when I'm watching this and I'm seeing Dr. Dre in the middle of LA and he's dancing around, I can't get this song out of my head. And I hope you shouldn't either. F the police. When I see out there, I see Dr. Dre out there, I see him in this image. I see this whole history between correlation between like authority and power and inequality and oppression and criminality and all the complexity of NWA and gangster rap, which is sort of simultaneously glorifying this life while also, and more importantly, shining a light on it. Just talking about the criminality, talking about the crack epidemic, which was either tacitly supported or directly supported by the American government, the destruction of the African-American communities by the crack epidemic, as it is described in this music, goes hand in hand with this animosity towards the police. And that was all there. That was all there on that big goofy stage. To put too fine of a point on, in the Vanity Fair article today, they talked about the controversies, but Vanity Fair, okay, we can't blame them. It's not their fault. They weren't paying attention. They didn't even really catch what the controversy was. And I need to make sure I'm not going to miss my class because of this. Good, I have a little bit of time. Still, even Jay-Z couldn't smooth over every wrinkle when it came to dealing with the risk-averse NFL, who have seemingly worked overtime to avoid controversy since the notorious wardrobe malfunction during Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake's performance in 2004. According to a report in Puck, NFL representatives were micromanaging the presentation, and a source close to Dr. Dre said he felt disgustingly censored. Well, of course, because the very first line that he said is supposed to be, "I'm the mother effing Dr. Dre," right? They apparently took aim at a line in Still DRE where he says he is still not loving the police. In addition, Eminem was asked not to do a Kaepernick-style kneel on stage, and one of Snoop's planned outfits was flagged as being gang-related because it was blue. It seems the NFL was overruled, however, and Eminem did some combination of kneel and Tebowing motion. Snoop wore the blue bandana, and of course, Dre put plenty of emphasis from Still DRE. This may be due to the control the performers negotiated from the outset. But here's the thing, and I swear to God, I'm sure 1,000 people are saying this right now, but this needs to be said by everybody. There was a censorship of a line about police. And if you are under the age of 40 goddamn 4, the only person you were watching that show for wasn't Eminem or Mary J. Blige or 50 Cent. Oh, see that vitamin water guy? My son was sitting next to me. He was texting his friends the whole time. They're just sitting there waiting for the king of rap right now, Kendrick Lamar, like the greatest hope, the greatest living rapper, right? That's that, at least while as long as Jay-Z is up in that owner's box and he's not trying to make music, right? Like they were just waiting for Kendrick. Kendrick was the star, not Dr. Dre, not Mary J. Blige. Kendrick was the one who we were all waiting for. And when he started to do all right, I don't know if you were like me, but the whole time I had it stuck in my head. I'm like, oh my God, he's doing all right. This was before the line is Still DRE. What is he going to say? Looking at the world like, where do we go? And we hate Popo, want to kill us in the street, kill us dead in the street for show. What did he say in the concert? He did not say we hate Popo. So the young person who still has a direct connection to the street is not some legacy character who's famous for selling earbuds and for being a name like Dr. Dre. The person who is still very much connected to the culture and to the streets as much as one can be while being such a successful pop star, Kendrick Lamar, he was censored. It's okay to say, still not loving the police. It is not okay to say, and we hate Popo. Now listen, you ask your parents, they don't know what Popo means. So people aren't even upset about this. This wasn't even in the Vanity Fair article. You have to know the song All Right to be alive on planet Earth and appreciate good art. You have to know the song in order to know what the line is. So there was censorship. So Vanity Fair, stop taking your little victory lap about the fact he said we're still not loving the police. Because the problem isn't not loving, it's the hate. It's the anger, it's the animosity between the groups. It is the result of this over-policing, of this under-schooling, of this wealth gap, of this rampant free market capitalism that is, since the 80s, getting bigger and bigger. The disparity between the rich and the poor is getting higher and higher, while more and more drugs are being poured into the system, and people are being more and more policed, and people are being pulled over for having gang member written all over their face. That was all in that show. And when he didn't say, and we hate Popo, that's when you know. That's when you know, like, that's the dangerous line. Not we still not loving the police. And what does it mean that the person who did kneel was the one white guy on stage? Was he the only guy who could get away with it? Was he the only guy who wanted to do it because everyone else might have saw it as being a poser? Was everyone else who was on stage still so conditioned by the way they've been treated by society, by culture, to be afraid to do that, for being seen as being too militant? So much was in this show. I'm sorry, that's the next slide of my class. So much was in this moment. So much of our society, the relationship between race, class, police, criminality, wealth divide, culture. And also, just a further reminder, hip hop has taken over the world. And it's forcing us to see these things and to confront these questions. God damn it. It's wonderful, isn't it? Isn't it exciting? Isn't it fun? I can't wait to teach my students. I hope they like it. I hope you like it. Tell me in the comments, smash the like buckets and all that stuff. I got to figure out how to stop this recording. How do I stop this recording? Well, first, I guess I got to tell you that there's the camera.